Have you ever noticed how, under the right conditions, you can guess exactly what someone is going to do before they even realize it themselves? We humans like to think we're completely unpredictable, but our behaviors actually follow highly structured patterns. When most people hear the word psychology, they immediately picture a very specific Hollywood cliché: the velvet couch, a notepad, and a lengthy conversation about why you're still mad at your elementary school teacher. But that's a caricature. At its actual core, psychology is a rigorous, hard science. It is the systematic study of both the internal mechanics of the mind and the external behaviors we exhibit. It provides the data to answer the why behind everything we do. Why do you suddenly forget where you put your keys the second you're running late? Why do you impulsively buy things you don't need simply because there's a bright red 20? You might wonder how analyzing something as abstract and invisible as a thought can be considered a legitimate science. How does this compare to a hard discipline like chemistry? Psychology follows the same underlying logic. It applies the scientific method to measure how the abstract elements of emotion, thought, and social influence interact to drive human action. Humans have been theorizing about the nature of the mind long before the invention of the laboratory. Thinkers across the ancient world spent lifetimes debating why we act the way we do. Philosophers like Plato helped build an early consensus, dedicating massive amounts of intellectual energy to analyzing human nature and the soul. But this ancient era hit a hard ceiling. Without a mechanism to objectively test these ideas, the study of the mind remained theoretical, confined to the realm of pure philosophy for thousands of years. That theoretical ceiling finally cracked in the year 1879. This is the exact moment psychology officially obtained its scientific driver's license. A scholar named Wilhelm Wundt, now widely recognized as the father of psychology, opened the world's very first dedicated psychology laboratory in Leipzig, Germany. Wundt needed a way to measure the invisible, so he developed a primary methodology called introspection. He trained observers to carefully analyze and report their own conscious experiences in response to specific stimuli. The objective here was to take the overwhelming, swirling complexity of human consciousness and break it down into its most basic, measurable components. By forcing observation into a structured, repeatable format, Wundt successfully moved the study of the mind out of the philosophy basement and straight into the empirical science laboratory. Following Wundt's initial breakthrough, the early 1900s saw the new discipline mature and branch out. It quickly stabilized into several distinct competing schools of thought, with each camp measuring entirely different variables. First came the behaviorists. They actively rejected the idea of measuring hidden thoughts, deciding instead to strictly focus on observable external actions that could be clearly recorded. On the opposite end of the spectrum were the psychoanalysts. They dedicated their research entirely to unpacking the hidden drives of the unconscious mind and interpreting the bizarre logic of dreams. Then came the 1950s and the cognitive revolution. Researchers began analyzing the brain through the lens of early computing power, treating human memory and problem-solving like complex software processing data inputs. The friction between these eras demonstrated that the mind cannot be measured by one single metric. A full understanding of human nature requires multiple, distinct scientific lenses working in tandem. So, the discipline began as ancient philosophy, finally put on a lab coat for structural rigor in 1879, and eventually grew into the multifaceted scientific field we know today. Today, this science is ubiquitous. It plays a direct role in engineering our everyday environments, right down to optimizing the layout of smartphone interfaces, specifically designed to capture and hold our attention. Regardless of the historical era or the specific methodology used in a laboratory, the ultimate thesis of psychology remains the same. It is the rigorous, systematic study of us. Which means that even in the most casual moments, like subtly suggesting your friend should probably pay for the next round of coffees, these behavioral principles are constantly operating right there in the background.